First of all, I'm really thrilled to introduce this author. The author, Terri Arthur, she is a local gal. She's written a number of books, and we've had her speak before. And this book that she's going to talk about tonight is a true story. She's a former disaster volunteer nurse for the American Red Cross and a charter member of the Nightingale Society. For her work advocating for the health and safety of nurses, she was awarded the Catherine McGinn Cutler Award from the Mass Nurses Association. The Boston, Massachusetts State House awarded her with a citation of recognition. Her book, Fatal Decision, Edith Cavell, World War I Nurse, won the Midwest Independent Publishers Award for historical fiction and was also a finalist for the Eric Hoffer Award. And can we give the news that it might be optioned as a screenplay? So you might be, it has been optioned for a screenplay, so we might be seeing that on the big screen soon. Terry's a former adjunct professor of Lesley University Graduate School, and she's the former nursing director of SEAK, a company that provides continuing education to nurses, doctors, and lawyers on occupational health and safety. In addition to being an author, Terri has worked as a critical care nurse, a staff educator, and a clinical manager. She holds degrees in nursing, education, and biology, and masters in health business management. She founded and continues to manage Medical Education Systems Incorporated, an educational company. She has published in the Journal of Emergency Nursing, the Online Journal of Issues in Nursing, the Navy Medical Magazine of History, the Nursing Standard in England, and the American Red Cross online magazine, Nursing Matters, past and present. She's frequently requested as a guest speaker nationally and internationally, speaking to historical societies, colleges, nursing schools, hospitals, women's groups, military groups, and nursing associations. Now that's my introduction of Terri. Terry's very modest, and I knew she wouldn't be saying all that stuff to you, so I wanted to let you know who she was before she started talking. Her suggestion was just to say, this is Terri Arthur, and she's a pretty good kid. So that's what I'm going to say, and here she is.
All right, well this is, like she said, this is a wonderful book to be doing now as we're all sitting here sweating. So we're going to be talking about this storm of 2008, 2013. The first thing I want to say about this book is that it was only out a few months when it got the Independent Press Award. I was very pleased with that and surprised. And it's not easy to get this particular award. It's an international award. The other thing I want to introduce to you with the book is these people. This is Kira Henschel, the lady with the blue, and then the other gal with the lighter hair. That's my cover designer. So this is my publisher and my cover designer. So now you get to meet who put the book together. Except there's an interesting hitch in this picture. My publisher lives in Wisconsin, and my cover designer lives in New Zealand. So the question is, how in the hell did these two ever get together? Right? So what happened is that my publisher's daughter wanted to go to New Zealand, and Kira went with her. And I said, if you're going to New Zealand, then you got to meet the person who did all your covers, because she did all of these covers. So I said, you should at least meet the person who's doing the covers of the book that you published. So they did. They got together, and here they are having a little cup together. I just put this little slide because I didn't know not everybody does an intro. But I have a BS in secondary ed and biology. Actually, I did this before I was a nurse. I then went to school and became a diploma nurse. And I have a master's in health business management, and I do run my own business as well. I worked at Martha's Vineyard ER. I worked at the Falmouth ICU CCU. I was a unit manager over at Cape Cod Hospital for a cardiac renal unit. It's called Med-Surg. And I ran and worked on a cardiac step-down unit. And I also did orthopedics for 8 years. I was a staff educator at Cape Cod for, 3 or 4 years while I was getting my master's. And then they offered an early buyout, and I wanted the time to be able to go and do the research I needed for my first book. So I took a job up at Jordan Hospital as a per diem nurse, evenings on a cardiac step-down, so that I could just say, don't plug me in next week, I'm heading for London or Norwich or wherever I'm going, Brussels. And so it was nice, I had that kind of flexibility. So the question always is, why did you write this book? Why is this so important to you that you would want to spend a chunk of your life writing it, and then another chunk of your life trying to market it? So the answer is this. I always said that I pondered that I might in some way have failed. Now, years later, it still haunts me. I continue to wonder what else I could have done And I dedicated the book to my colleagues who weather the storm every day they go to work. As she mentioned, I did become a Red Cross disaster nurse. That's hopefully not as a disaster as a nurse, but a nurse who works in the disasters, and hopefully not both. So this is me at one of the Red Cross disaster centers. I had, before I wrote this book, I had already done it 3 times in 3 different places. And so what happens is you go in and you set up the medical section of the shelter. And you're on your own. There's no doctors or social workers or pharmacists or anybody else. You're it. You go in, you set it up, and you're the only person that takes care of these people. So this book is about good intentions, mounting surprises, erratic bosses, unforeseen circumstances swirling out of control. Did I say that right? For those of you who read it? Okay. The book is based on the storm of February 8th in 2013. It was called Nemo. How many of you remember that storm? It was kind of a storm hard to forget. The meteorologist said that when you put together 2 storms, you're going to get a knockout punch, and this is going to be one. This is considered to be one of the worst 5 storms of the century. So I don't know if you remember this storm. I mean, people coming back from Florida said they had to dig in order to get into their front doors. And I've just talked to someone who said she had to dig to get out of her front door. So it was that kind of thing. But this went on for 3 days. In this particular one, you can see where the Cape is. You can see where the swirl of the storm is. It's a combination of a hurricane and a blizzard. They called it a bombogenesis. And we were smack in the middle of it, right here. It actually went from like Tennessee up to Nova Scotia. And the entire East Coast was covered with the storm. Now, for whatever crazy reason, and I don't know why even today, but I did save all of the Cape Cod Times newspapers and the Boston Globe newspapers during the storm. I don't know. I guess the storm bugged me, and I guess what happened during the storm never quite left me, and so I collected the newspapers. So now, when in the book, I'm able to actually publish those newspapers that headlines to give you an idea as to what was going on at the time. Not just what I'm saying, geez, it was a bad storm. You can actually see what the storms, how they were characterized even in the newspapers. So this is the Cape Cod Times. It says, nor'easter clobbers the Cape. Bomb cyclone topples trees and cuts out power lines. And here's another one that says, the blizzard bears down. Airlines have been canceled. More than 5,300 flights from New Jersey to Maine. Basically, Governor Deval Patrick closed the entire state down. That was it. But the Cape got it even worse than the rest of the state because we're right on the coast. The Boston Globe, basing for a big one, anticipating this is one of the historic top 5 snowstorms. And like I said, Governor Deval Patrick closed things down and activated 500 National Guards. Everyone was told to stay off the roads. In fact, when I got a call, and I knew I was going to get this call, when I got the call to please go up to the shelter and open it up, and as I was heading in, the road that led to the shelter had a sawhorses crossed all the way across it. And I'm like, well, this is kind of weird. How are you supposed to go to the shelter when they blocked off the road? So, being who I am, I picked up the sawhorses and I moved them aside and I went in and I said, what are you doing blocking the road? I mean, how are people supposed to come here? You've got the road blocked. They said, oh, well, there's this other road. You go around this way and that way. And yes, yeah. I'm sure people are going to do that. Well, I hate to tell you, but I moved these sawhorses. People can now come in when they need help. The other thing that was happening, of course, with the May storm is, the Stop and Shop and Rumpf Brothers and Shaw's, everybody is in a rush to fill up with all the supplies because they don't know, if they're going to lose electricity or they're going to have water and all those kinds of things. So this is the kind of flurry that happens before a storm like this. How many of you have ever been to a shelter? You ever been to a shelter in a storm? A couple of you? Okay. Well, usually when you walk into a shelter, this is the first thing you see. These are the first signs you see. And you see, they tell you no weapons, no drugs, no alcohol. And they used to say no pets, but that's not true anymore, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. And of course now they say wear masks, and no COVID, they test you for COVID. Now they have what's called DART, the Disaster Animal Rescue Team. It's a wonderful group, because they discovered that when they would have these storms and people needed to go because the electricity was going off and you wouldn't have heat, people needed to go to the shelters, they wouldn't go because they wouldn't leave their animals behind. So some of them got quite sick and got into trouble because they were in homes that were like 40 degrees, and but they would not leave their animals. So they set up the DART team, and the DART team goes through classes and training, and in every shelter there's a DART team. And in a separate area, this particular place was a high school, and downstairs was the DART team, and they had separate large cages, and the owners were allowed to go down, but nobody else was allowed to go down. You couldn't go down and go, oh, I think I'll play with the cute puppies. No, you couldn't do that. Or cats or whatever people brought in. They brought in a little bit of everything. So this was a big guy that was one of the people, one of them that were brought in. The other thing that we did, which always amazed me, is when you go to these, well, let me back up a little bit. An interesting thing happened with Cape Cod Red Cross. One of the things that happened while I was working with them is they regionalized. Now, before this, we were our own region. We knew what things worked on the Cape and what didn't. We had three, what they call ERVs, which are I'm going to call them trucks, I guess, that had everything we had three of them, Upper Cape, Mid Cape, Lower Cape. When they came in, we were concerned about, whether we would lose anything, and in fact, they told us that we would not only not lose anything, but because they were in the wider area, they would be bringing things to the Cape. Well, that turned out not to be true. It turned out that they ended up taking some of our trucks, because they said, by population, you don't need 3 trucks. We said, but by geography, we need 3 trucks. You don't understand what it's like to go from Falmouth to Provincetown. So, but anyway, so we lost one. But the interesting thing now is, before, when we opened up the shelters, I knew everybody was coming into the shelter because it was mostly Red Cross or the Medical Corps or the EMT crew. Now, when the shelters are open up, they could be coming in from anywhere, Fall River, Brockton, Somerset, anywhere. They could be coming in from anywhere. So when you walk in, you have this mix of people that are all strangers to make this work, which it was like a new thing for me to kind of get used to. So you always have to say, hi, who are you? Oh, okay, that's your name. And what do you do? And then they tell you what you do. So one of the things that we also did is we had the AmeriCorps to help us, and they would set up these cots for people so that they could sleep. Has anyone ever tried to sleep on a cot, an army cot?
Yeah.
Isn't that fun? You like that a
Not easy to
lot?
set up either.
Oh, wasn't it fun when you try and turn over and your knees hit the metal on the side? That felt so good. So we set them up, and then when I first walked in, we usually have the nurses' room. And I walked into the nurses' room, and there was nothing there. My Red Cross box wasn't there, and I came back out and I said, how come I'm not set up in the Red Cross room? And they said, the shelter manager decided to put you in this other room. I went, but the Red Cross room has got privacy with people coming in. It's got a toilet, it's got a place I can wash my hands and they can wash their hands or whatever. And it's got all the equipment, everything I need. No, she wants you in this other room. Okay, so it took me to the other room, and the other room really was a storage room. And it had chairs and tables all back jammed up against the wall, and then it was empty. That was it, and it was one desk. So I got a chair, I brought it down, and there were no windows in it whatsoever. There was one light that came down the middle of it. It sort of looked like an interrogation room, like put you in the chair and put the light down, Okay, tell us, are you a spy, are you not a spy? So, and that was it, that was the light. And I looked at the room and I went, this is like pretty bleak. But anyway, I got an AmeriCorps kid and I said, can you start undoing some of these tables and chairs so that people can come in and at least sit down? And then I said to the guy, where's the bathroom? Well, it's down the hall on the right, down that way. Oh, that's interesting. So I no sooner took my coat off when people started coming in. The first one was a man who was COPD, emphysema, and he had an oxygen concentrator, that's this black machine on the left, that is electricity dependent, which is why he was coming in, because he knew the electricity would go off at home and he needed the oxygen. He wouldn't have oxygen without it. Then I had a woman that came in with a feeding pump. She had stomach cancer. She was a skinny little lady. She was all about 80 pounds. And the feeding pump was her nutrition and her hydration. Then I had another man walked in with a COPD. Now this was all like in about, 10 minutes. I hadn't taken my coat off yet. And so I said to the first guy who came in, I said, could you just sit for a minute? I said, are you okay right now? Yeah, okay. I said, all right, I need to get the paperwork and everything, and I just walked in myself. The same thing with the second, with the one with the feeding pump, and then a third guy came in who was also a COPDer, and he had tanks that he was breathing from. So I managed to at least get my coat off and get the paperwork, and as I was starting to admit them, then they brought in a 90-year-old lady who was under 5 feet and about as wide, and she had cellulitis of both legs and she was incontinent. Her legs were dripping from the knee down. And I'm thinking, this lady shouldn't be here. This lady should be like in the emergency room. She'd be in the hospital. She should be on antibiotics. She should be treated. These legs need to be treated. So anyway, I led her over to a stretcher, and she said, I can't sit on that. I went, okay, well, here's a chair. She goes, well, what am I going to sleep on? I went, it's a stretcher. She goes, I can't sleep on that stretcher. I said, why? She said, because no, I can't get up and I can't get down off of it. So I said, stuck my head out and yelled to the guy at the desk, could you bring in the manager? And I said, who is the manager, by the way? And they said, we haven't figured it out yet. I said, well, could you figure it out and send her over so I would know who she is? And so it was a long time before she showed up. And I'll tell you what happened a little bit when she showed up. And then I had a woman with pica. Do you know what pica is?
She eats things.
Right. It's a
Eating disorder.
It's an eating disorder. They eat just about everything. When I lived in South Carolina, we had patients down there with pica, and they would eat the clay. So there's some of them eat paper, they eat anything. So she came in, and she came with a whole bag of goodies. At the same time, she wasn't going to be without anything, that's for sure. And she also she brought in her CPAP machine at nighttime. Then as the storm began to continue, and it built up very fast. Here's 5,000 homes without power on the Cape. It didn't take long before everybody lost electricity. Cape takes a hit. So I'm trying to get everybody comfortable, and finally the manager comes in, and her name, I gave her the name of Nick Nutter. I have to tell you, every name in the book is not the real name because I didn't want to be sued. And I call the town Shelton. We know there is no Shelton on Cape Cod. I figure if Steven Spielberg can call Edgartown Amityville, I can call this town Shelton. What the hell, right? I can do that. I'm the author. I got the pen. I could do whatever I want to. So that way I didn't have to worry about someone coming back with repercussions on writing this book, which was one of the reasons why I hesitated to write the book. So I figured out that this would be about the best I could do to protect myself legally. But anyway, supper came around, and usually when supper comes around, we get pizza or we get lasagna or something. But supper came around, somebody walked over to the table in the middle of the room and dropped a bag of bagels and said, that's your supper. Now I had 2 people who were diabetics, and I had a woman who was gluten intolerant. What was I supposed to do with them? So I looked at them and I said, you gotta be kidding me. And they're like, the drink or put on this or no, that's it. They walked away. So I'm like, this is, let me talk to the shelter manager again. So I went out and I found her, and she says, that's it, that's all they got. They can't bring anything else in. The roads are all blocked, and they can't, that's all we could get. I went, all right. So that was, the problems began to mount one at a time. Again, they were saying the blizzard with heavy snowfall, power outages started to happen, and indeed the power failed and at the shelter, and the backup generator kicked in for about an hour or so, and then it failed. So here I was now around 10, 11 o'clock at night, and no power, which means no heat, by the way, and it means that my man with the oxygen concentrator is not getting oxygen, and it means the woman on the feeding pump is not getting her food or hydration, and it means that the woman with the CPAP machine is not going to be able to use it. She's not going to be able to put her head down. So I went to the shelter manager and I said, you've got to get some of these people out. I said, I did bring a pox machine with me, where you test your finger and you know what the oxygen concentrator is, so I did bring that. I did ask the Red Cross to put one of those in the box, and she told me she didn't think it was necessary, so I brought my own. And, and by the way, in the book, there's a picture of this, the pox machine, and there's a finger. So I have to tell you about the finger. The finger is my sister's finger, and so she modeled the pox machine, and she laughed at me, and she said, I'm going to get an Emmy for this. She had a bunch of her fingers sticking out. So she's so proud that her finger is in the book. So, okay. So now you know, it's Gail's finger. So I brought the shelter manager and I said, you gotta transfer some of these patients out. This man here has got a pox of 85 and he's gonna go down when he goes, 95, when he goes down below 90, he's gonna be in trouble. And I said, see this guy over here with his oxygen tank? That tank is gonna be run out by the morning. He's not gonna have enough oxygen by the morning. Both of these people have to go. The lady over there who said she can't sleep, I know what we're gonna do with her, but look at these legs. She needs to go in the emergency as well. And the woman with the feeding pump, she needs to go. And the CPAP machine lady also needs to go. You've got to get them out. And she says to me, no, I'm not moving them out. I said, you have to move them out. She says, no, I don't. She said, I'm in charge of the shelter. I don't have to do, I can do whatever I want to do. I went, and what happens if these people get into trouble? What happens when they can't breathe anymore? She said, you're the nurse. That's your problem. You deal with it. So I went to the guy at the desk and I said, you know, usually there's 2 nurses who work these. Am I going to get a second nurse? And he said, I don't know, I'll check up. So he came back and he said, I think the medical corps is going to send you somebody over. So sure enough, in a little while, this woman came in, the lady in her 50s, short hair, and she came in and she said, I'm your backup nurse. I said, oh great, thank you. So we sat down, we talked a little bit, and I kind of told her what's going on around here. And I said, you know, we always did nurse talk, where do you graduate from, what do you do, what's your specialty? So I said, what is your specialty? And she said, maternity. Maternity? She said, yes. And I went, oh, okay. So, if I have anyone coming in saying, help, help, I'm coming, that's yours, right? So she said, yeah, I could deal with that. And I went, all right. And at that point, the feeding pump started to beep. And I said, could you go on over there and settle up the feeding pump and let me take care of this over here? She says, I don't do feeding pumps. I went, you don't do feeding pumps? She goes, no, I've never done a feeding pump. I don't know anything about them. I went, okay, so why don't we just have you monitor the patients and I'll do the admissions and I'll do the feeding pump. And that's kind of the way it went. I was sort of like, oh my God, you know, this isn't what I expected. So as we're dealing with all of this, the next thing I know, the CPAP machine lady disappears. I can't find her anywhere. It's a huge high school, and I went to the desk. I said, "You got to get your EMTs and whoever you got, the AmeriCorps kids, or whatever. You got to get them out there to try and find this lady. I don't know if she's inside, outside, upside down. I don't know where the woman is." I said, "But I would think she left her bag here. I would think she wouldn't have gone too far without her food." But she was gone, and so now we're worried about the fact that not only do I have people that are worried about whether they're going to make it, but now I have someone who doesn't even know where they are. So I went back to the manager. I need people to be looking for this lady, and she said, "That's up to you. You find out whoever you can to go find her." So she was a real treasure. Again, this is some of the storms, some of the writings of the storm. Waves are as high as 20 feet, destroyed 10 to 20 feet of our shorelines. We lost a lot of shoreline on that storm. And here's the Boston Globe blown away. Massive storm, bills up by the hour, bringing heavy snow and rampant outages. So, and then it says the governor, in extraordinary step, bans all use of the roads. So this is what's going on outside as I'm dealing with this on the inside. And I'm watching this man, I'm watching the oxygen concentration of this man drop down to 94, 92, 91, and I'm like, this isn't good. And I keep saying to her, you got to get him out, you got to get him out. And she says, no, I'm not getting him out. I said, if he goes below 90, he's in trouble. And she said, well, that's your problem, not mine. So I'm back in, and I went to I'm trying to straighten this out with the nurse that I'm with, and I said, we're in trouble here. And I did a few things. You'd have to read the book to see what I did. I did a few things. I did a buddy system on the tank, the one tank I had, and I went to the ambulance and I said, don't you have an extra tank in your ambulance? And they said, yeah, we have 2 tanks. I said, I need one of them. And they said, well, we don't usually give them out. I said, give me a break. I got this guy who's like almost down to 90. Give me a tank. So they gave me the tank, they handed it to me, and there was only one problem with the tank. It had no gauge. So how am I supposed to give this guy oxygen with a tank? That's it. Nothing on the top to control the oxygen to the tank. So what I did is I kept them buddying on the tank that the one guy had, and when he ran out, then I took the gauge off of that tank and put it onto the new tank and had them buddy on that tank back and forth. But I knew we couldn't do this forever. Something had to happen here. So I said to Jan, I think, the woman who was with me, I said, we're in trouble. Something has to break. And she finally says to me, oh, before we did this, yes, I said, look, let's call the nursing head of the Red Cross and see if she could talk to this woman and convince her that these people got to go out. So we call her up. I call her Alice, that was another name, and I told her the story, and she says, let me talk to her. So she talks to her, and there's an EMT also says, we'll get him to the hospital. And there were 5 of us standing there on the phones that were all, everybody could hear what was going on. And the woman still stands there, puts her hands on her hips, and she says, no, I run this shelter. They came here to be cared for, and they're going to stay here. And I turned to Jan and I said, what are we going to do about this? And finally Jan says to me, oh, and by the way, my phone was AT&T, and you couldn't use AT&T in this particular high school, incidentally. But fortunately, hers was on Verizon. So with a Verizon phone, she was able to make a call. So she made the call to the head of the EMS system on Cape Cod. She knew who it was. And I looked at her and I went, how did you know who that was? She said, well, why would I not? I said, I don't know who that is. I certainly don't have him on my speed dial. How did you know who it was? And she goes, well, I'm the head of the nursing at the medical corps. I went, you're the lead nurse at the medical corps? She goes, yeah, I am. I went, I didn't know that. I said, you just told me you're a maternity nurse. She goes, oh no, I'm the charge nurse over at the medical corps. I went, okay. So she does make the call. Jan makes the call. And that's a wonderful chapter in the book. It's such catharsis writing this chapter of the EMS director talking to this woman whom I call McNutter. Actually, her real name was worse than that. And whom I call McNutter. And we could hear the conversation back and forth. And he kept saying, "You get those people out." And she kept saying, "I can't get them out because the one plow we had is stuck and there's no way to get in here." He says, "I will get a plow in there and I will plow it before your ambulance, and you get them in the ambulance and you get them out." So he said, "And I want them out by the morning." And so he does. He calls a bigger plow to come in and to clean the area out in the front. And the other plow was stuck. We had to work around that plow. And by this time it was morning, and the ambulances were able to start to come in and start to pick up patients and move them out. So one at a time, maybe 2. I think they took 2 or 3, depending on what was wrong with them, in the ambulance to take them out. And the plow was able to clean the area out. And the McDonough determines as to who will go first. And I said, the COPDers go first. No, I don't think so. I'll take the guy who's in the cast first. I'll take the one who's got the flu next. And I went, no, you've got to take these people first. She said, I'm in charge of this. I can take whoever I want to. So she doesn't. She takes the patients that are the least of a problem and moves them up first. So I'm struggling with the other. And in the middle of all of this, by the way, no breakfast, incidentally, coming up. Next thing I know, she says, "You've got a new patient." I went, "No, I don't." She goes, "Yes, you do." And I look over, and it's a woman who is very heavy. She's in a wheelchair. She is a diabetic. She is a chronic lunger and has an oxygen tank with her. And she has a son with her who is disabled, mentally disabled. And I went, "Why are you admitting her? Put her on the ambulance and send her out. Why do I admit her and then you send her back out again?" She came here because she wanted to be dealt with, she wanted to be processed, and so we're going to do it. I went, "But that doesn't make any sense. Put her in the ambulance and take her out, let them process her." "No, I'm the shelter manager, I can do what I want to." So, so here we were gradually, moving these people out. But let me backtrack a little bit. The question was, what do we do about food? Diabetics and gluten intolerant, that kind of thing. And about an hour later, the missing CPAP machine lady shows up. And she's got a bag with her. And I went, "Where have you been?" She said, in the kitchen. I said, I've been down to the kitchen. I said, I couldn't find anything down there. I said, what have you got? Well, she had cereal, and she had milk, and she had yogurt, and she had potato chips, and cookies, and I went, where did you get all that? She goes, in the kitchen, silly. Where else do you think I got this? I went, but that's impossible. I said, you got that in the refrigerator? She said, yes. I said, I went to the refrigerator. There's a lock on the door of the refrigerator. She said, oh, there's a lock on the door, right? But it's not locked. I went, you have to bring me downstairs. So we go downstairs, and sure enough, it's not locked. And I said, show me where you got all this stuff. And so she showed me. So I was able to bring that all back and at least feed my people with the little bit that I brought and some of the stuff she came in. But however, it was her. She wasn't going to give it up. This is a piker lady. She's not giving up her food. Are you kidding me? What do you think she went down there for? I had to bargain with her. I go, okay, 2 chocolate chip cookies for the yogurt. Deal? Make it 3. Boy, you're a hard bargainer. Okay, 3 chocolate chip cookies for her. And then, because the Red Cross had brought in a box of like cookies and chips and stuff earlier, and I picked up some of that stuff. So the stuff that I picked up, peanut butter crackers and things, I was able to bargain with her cereal and milk and yogurt and those kinds of things, so I could feed my gluten intolerant lady and my diabetics. So there was a bargaining process that went on with her, but at least she wasn't outside in the storm, and in a strange sort of weird way, I was able to meet the needs, at least basic needs, of some of the people who were there. Then, so eventually everybody was out. They were out by maybe 11 o'clock in the morning, all of my patients anyway. And and people were folding up, they were closing down the shelter. And they were gradually moving patients to other shelters. And now I had to go out and dig my car out. So here I was, this is the afternoon of the next day. I had no sleep from the entire day, the entire night, and into the next day. So we're talking like a day and a half with no sleep. So here I am, digging my car out and thinking that I'm going to actually go home in this car. And I can't get the doors open because when I got the snow off, all of that nubbly ice, on the edges, you can't get it in it thick. And I couldn't get any of the doors to open up with that nubbly stuff. And so neither of the doors would work. And so I thought maybe the tailgate might work as an SUV. So I went in the back and cleaned things off, and sure enough, because the lever was under, it wasn't frozen. And I was able to open it up. So now was my job to get from the back of the car with all these clothes on and to the front of the car to get it turned on. So I think I wrote in the book, and it was true. It reminded me when I was a kid. Remember when you were a kid and you had like a onesie piece, and then they had your gloves, and the glove would be either on a string, remember those days, or it would be on a safety pin or something, so you didn't lose your gloves. Well, that's what I felt like. I felt like I was trying to get in the back seat and in the front. And finally, I made it to the front over the gear shift, which wasn't too pleasant, and into the front. And I started the car up, and it started right up in the heat. And I said, the heat feels so good. This is really nice. And then I'm sitting there, and I'm going, what am I smelling? And I'm starting to cough. I'm having a hard time breathing. I'm like, oh no, no. So I've got to get out of here. So the windows are frozen, they wouldn't go down. I'm trying to kick the door open, it wouldn't open up. Finally, I leaned back with both feet, jammed it against the door, got the door open. I turned around and I went outside. I went and I looked at the exhaust pipe, and sure enough, there was a block of ice about the size of a Coke bottle jammed into the back. So I knew I wasn't going anywhere with this car. So I went back in and I said, can anybody give me a ride home? And so this guy says, well, I've got a truck. I'll take you home in my truck. I went, hey, I'll take it, you bet. So into the truck I go, and he takes me up to the end of my street. I live on Bacon Farm Road, which is off of Davisville. And he stops me at the end of the road, and he says, this is as far as I can take you. He said, look, nothing's plowed. I can't take my truck down there. I'll be stuck. So he says, you're on your own after this. So I jumped off, and I'm standing there, and I'm looking ahead of me at a white wilderness. And I realized that from this spot to my home, because when I go walking, I counted, it's 150 steps. So that chapter is called the 150 Steps chapter, about my struggle to get from that spot to get home. So I'm not going to tell you all of it, you have to read that chapter as to how that happened. So this is me kind of struggling along. So this is pretty much kind of what the book is all about. This is a pretty good synopsis of the book. The interesting thing is that after I wrote this book, well, while the time I was writing this book, I always have someone editing me as I'm writing. So I had a nurse and a non-nurse editing me as I was writing at the chapters, so that the nurse could let me know that if I was saying everything correctly, and the non-nurse would say, I don't understand this. So I would know that the average reader needed to be able to understand it too. So we got all done, and I was ready to send it into my editor and then send it into my publisher. I have an editor down in Philadelphia. And they said to me, we like the book, but there's something missing in your book. I went, what's missing in it? There's nothing else to say. And they said, well, it needs to be like a wrap-up. It needs to be like a ta-da. I said, there is no wrap-up. I went to all the Red Cross shelter meetings. I told them what happened. Nobody did anything about it. I asked them to go to the EMS meetings, the monthly meetings that they had. I was told that I was not allowed to go to that meeting because I wasn't the kind of people who go. And they said that they would discuss it, which I don't believe they did. And nothing has been done. Absolutely nothing. There's been no follow-up on this whatsoever. And in fact, I was told by my director of nursing that, yes, indeed, I said, is there going to be another disaster? Is she going to be in charge of the shelter again? And she said, yes. I said, well, I want to tell you this. I will never, ever, ever work under her again, and neither will the medical corps person, which means that none of her nurses will ever work for her either. And if you're really silly enough to put another nurse under her, then you've made a big, big mistake. I have to tell you that. And the other thing is, you need to tell your nurses what the chain of command is. I had no idea where to go. I said, you didn't call anybody, so, if I had had that chain of command, I would have continued to call up. But thank God she did, and she was able to do it, and we were able to keep these people safe. But I said to my editors, my two little editors, I said, I don't know what to tell you. It's the end of the story. They're not moving her. She's not been punished. They're not changing anything, and she'll be there for the next storm. What else am I to say? And they said, I don't know, it's just, you're missing something, Terri. And, well, I can't make it up. It's the true story. Next thing I know, just as I'm ready to send it out to my editor and then to the publisher, an article comes in the Cape Cod Times. And I'm reading it. And it says, shelter chiefs weather the storm, and it goes on to quote, now we're talking 9 years later, it goes on to quote all the problems that happened in this shelter this year and this storm, and all the things they have done. It took them 9 years, and they went a rush, right? Over the 9 years to change it. So regional emergency planners are vowing not to be caught off guard again, it says. The building's generator and floor plan were determined not to be ideal for the weathering of this kind of storm, and officials are looking for an alternative as using the shelter for future storms. In other words, they would never use this high school again for a storm. I don't know what they were doing the last 9 years with it, but they weren't going to do it anymore. The regional emergency planners will take a second look at who is chosen to manage the shelters during the storm so that they will be fully prepared for the assignment. Because it was obvious to me that this lady, first of all, this lady had no medical background, and second of all, she didn't have no emergency background either. So it was obvious to me that it was a political, somebody she knew put her in there, because that's the only position that gets paid in the storms. And somehow she was put in by somebody else. And that was why they wouldn't tackle her. That was why they said, no, she's allowed to do this. And plans in the future, all shelter managers will be, I love this one. Plans in the future, all shelter managers will be required to attend a training program and understand all the protocols. So in other words, that's the end of, your husband is the state town planner or whatever, or your brother is the fire chief or police chief or whatever. That was the end of it. That anybody who took that position now had to go through a training program. So it took them 9 years to figure that out as well. But they did. So now when you go into the shelters, all these things that have been put in place. So the last chapter that I wrote was this, the changes that have been made over the 9 years because of what happened back there in 13. So it was, in the end, it was not a naught. In the end, it turned out to really make a big difference in your EMS system over the years. Some of the comments that I've had about this book, this woman wrote in, Anna LaFleur, she's a nurse. She said, I started to read Paraphilia this morning. I was so enthralled that I kept reading until I finished. I clearly remember that storm. Never let anyone interfere with your nursing judgment. Another example of why nurses are heroes. How many nurses do I have here? Are these two? Nurse? Yes. This lady here wrote in, the conditions described in the book illustrate multiple-fold the hardship under which nurses perform miracles every minute. Miracles never told or evident. Right?
Terry, that's
Huh?
me.
That's her. Oh, that's you, Helen, yes. All right. All right. That's Helen. Helen comes in a lot with my Facebook page. So here you are, Helen. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
But last of all, well, let me tell you this before I give you the last of all. Last of all, when I did the book launch at the Wacoit Congregational Church at the Parsonage Center, I was really shocked. I mean, I've gone to other people's book launches, and you're lucky if you got like 12, 20 people that go to these things. I had 70, we planned for 75, which I thought, we'll never get that. And we had 85 people show up. But one of them, of the 85, was the Red Cross charge nurse. And I sat there and I went, uh-oh. This is either going to be very good or very bad. So I kind of waited, and I went through my shtick, and I told her all about it. And indeed, she stood up. And I forgot to breathe when she stood up. This is going to be bad. So I didn't know whether I didn't even realize that I'd stopped breathing. And so she stood up and she said, I want to thank Terri for writing this book. I think everybody in the emergency system should read it. And I felt myself audibly exhale. It's okay. So I was very pleased with that one. And this one here, it was from Hillary Green, and she's the executive director of the Red Cross. It was at that time, she's not now. I'm glad you wrote the book, and also that you survived the experience. Love your writing and hope to see more books from you. And this is from the executive director of the Red Cross at that time. So, because I was always worried that I didn't, the shelter's not run by the Red Cross, they're run by the EMS system. And the Red Cross joins in and provides nurses or whatever, but they don't run the shelters anymore. They used to, but they don't anymore. So, but the fact that Hillary wrote this I was very, very pleased, because I thought I didn't want anybody to look bad in the Red Cross. But it was what it was. I couldn't make it up. And but I was glad to get this from Hillary. I was really pleased that she was pleased with the book. And last of all, this is one character I want you to meet that's in the book. This is my buddy Jackson. He's in the book, and he's one of the characters in the book. And you'll have to meet him and see what kind of antics he gets himself into.
Is that his real name?
That's his real name, Jackson. Yeah, I didn't change his name. I didn't figure he would sue me. I think he has to behave himself, or else he doesn't get dinner. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. And Terry's going to stay, and she's going to sign some books if anybody needs to pick up either one of them or the three. And please help yourselves to some refreshments.